And welcome on in. A happy new year to you. This is Lunch with Claibs and Joe here on claibsonline.com, powered by Gray Bar. I'm Joe Roderick, joined alongside Mike Claiborne as both of us are snowed in. Pretty much the same goes for the rest of the St. Louis Metro East area here on this Monday.
Yeah, it's snowing all right. And as you know, I am not one that is a big fan of the weather prognosticators here locally because they miss it more than they get it right. But this time they did get it right, and I tip my cap to them because normally when we get this whole big threat of going out buying all the bread and milk you can find, we get a slight dusting, and then they say, "Well, it missed us because of global warming," or what? They come up with some lame excuse. Well, this time they got it right. And apparently, in talking to a meteorologist in another city about this, and they said, "How could you miss this one?" I mean, it was that obvious that we were going to get it, and it was one of those things where you almost had to be an imbecile to miss this one. He said, "Even you could see this one coming," and I said, "Well, I'm not an imbecile." He said, "Well, maybe some days I am, but point being, they got it right. People seem like they were reasonably prepared, and hopefully we can get just a little bit of a melt so people can get out and about on the streets. I know I need to."
It was a good day to have it happen on a Sunday, the last Sunday of the NFL regular season. So, kind of hunkered down Saturday afternoon, had the two games Saturday, and then all day yesterday from noon till about you could turn your TV off around 10 o'clock or so because that game was over with pretty early into the second half. But we now know what the NFL postseason looks like for the 2025 playoffs. Claibs once again 14 teams in the playoffs. The Chiefs and the Lions, they get your one seeds this year. The Lions in dominating fashion last night over the Vikings. Here is what your wild card weekend looks like, and we'll get to the games before we get to the job openings. The Chargers and the Houston Texans open up at 3:30 on Saturday, and then you have the Steelers and the Ravens for the third time this year. That's your night game on Saturday. Sunday at noon, it's Denver at the Bills. Then the Green Bay at Philadelphia in the afternoon game. And then Sunday night on NBC, it's the Commanders against the Buccaneers. And then your Monday night game in the wild card round this year, it is the Vikings headed to LA for the Rams. So Claibs, 6 games, 2 Saturday, 3 Sunday, 1 Monday. Is there one on there that you are going to make sure is appointment viewing that you have nothing going on for that 3.5-hour block?
Man, it's a good question. Man, to see Baltimore and Pittsburgh play each other for a third time is I mean, what's left? What don't we know about the other team? That'll be interesting. The Eagles and Packers again, two teams that look a lot different than they did opening day. I think I'm anxious to see the Buccaneers and the Commanders. Two teams that nobody saw the Commanders coming, and the Buccaneers were able to stay reasonably healthy and make a good run at the end, even though they were playing in a division that was trying to give it to them, and they did. So those are some I would like to see on the other side of the coin. The Texans and the Chargers. You have two high-strung coaches, man, that really get their team motivated. I'm looking forward to the matchup of Bosa against Tunsil. Laramie Tunsil's one of the better tackles in the game, and Bosa, when he's healthy, and he's had a few injuries during the course of the year, that could be a really fun matchup. And Khalil Mack's playing well again. So I think it's going to be a real challenge for the Houston Texans to really go up against that San Diego defense. So that's going to be a fun series. I'll tell you the one that Bills and Broncos, the weather's going to be crappy. I just don't know what you get out of that. I think guys will get tired of trying to tackle Josh Allen by the third quarter. So I expect the Bills to go in there and really, they'll host Denver. I think they'll go in and do some real damage against them.
By the way, the Texans game, this is the 8th time in Houston Texans history that they have made the playoffs and been in the wild card round. Claibs, every single one of those, all 8 of those games, they have hosted the 3:30 Saturday game. They have been locked in on that first game on Saturday every single time they make the playoffs. If Houston is in the playoffs, they have their own it's like what the Reds used to have for opening day in Major League Baseball. They were the first game of the year. The Houston Texans, if they make the postseason, they are the first game of the postseason each and every year. It's a tradition.
Normally because they're not very good in the playoffs and they want to get it over with. That's the only thing I can think of. I mean, I don't recall any of the Houston teams. You had to go back to Bum Phillips when they had Earl Campbell and that bunch for them to actually be considered legit.
They don't win many of those, no.
That's my point. So maybe they just said, let's just get it over with. We don't have to worry about them being in New Orleans.
I mean,
I'll tell you, the team that's got the easiest path to me is Detroit. Detroit may not ever lead. Detroit may not play another game outdoors until next season.
I mean, well, that's the beauty of having that number one seed. And you look at it, though, they haven't played outdoors a whole lot the whole year. That's why it was so important for them to get that one seed, and the Vikings just wouldn't go away all year long.
Chicago, their last game, they played outdoors?
I would be shocked if they played 4 games outdoors.
Yeah, I think
that includes, I mean, that includes Chicago and Green Bay, who they played in their division. I think when you look at everything else, but all year long, we talked about the Lions being this dominating team, the Lions being the best team in the NFC. And quietly, the Vikings go and put up a 14-3 record, and the Eagles too. And the Eagles seemed like they were, 2-3 games behind the Lions all season when they went into yesterday's game with a 13-3 record. Those two teams having the 14-3 record, the Eagles and the Vikings, it seems like if possible, those two went under the radar because of how much the Lions became the darlings of the NFL this past season.
Yeah, Detroit was the darlings. They played the Green Bay Packers, Green Bay, Chicago, and they went to San Francisco. Those are the only games they played outdoors. Well, no, they were Detroit, but that was preseason. That doesn't count.
No.
So they've only played 3 games outdoors all year.
Yeah.
But, so go back to your point. Here's one of the things that really impresses me about Detroit. They sell out on defense, man. I mean, I think that most people thought when they lost Hutchinson and they lost a couple of linebackers, they were just going to try and play it safe, the bend and don't break defense, so to say. Man, they are selling out. And like last night, Chris Collinsworth alluded to it earlier in the game that they were going to try and put some licks on Sam Darnold, and it worked. It worked. I mean, Darnold was off by a hair here and off by a touch there. Now, I don't know if you can do that against their next opponent, and we don't know who that next opponent might be. But my point being, when you look at how this team has still come together, and they're going to get some guys back here at some point. They're going to get some guys back. And that's going to make this thing even more interesting for them as far as what they can do in postseason.
Their next opponent very well could be the Minnesota Vikings if they are able to upset the Rams in the first round. I am surprised that the NFL didn't go with Green Bay and Philadelphia as the primetime game on Sunday, that they put that in the afternoon, because I think that's the one that all eyes are going to be on, with Green Bay having a very good season and having an exciting quarterback like Jordan Love. And then you look at what the Eagles did all year. I'm surprised that was not their pick for this is our primetime game that we want everybody watching. That's the one I think, though, on my list as I look at all these games, that's the one I'm most excited to sit back and watch on Sunday, because for as good as the Eagles were this year, we've seen Green Bay play some really good games. And I think Green Bay just, they were stuck in a really, really good division.
Yeah,
this year. So they did get beat up on a little bit by the Vikings and the Lions. Is that something that's going to prepare them for a game against the Eagles coming up this week? I mean, the weather's not going to bother them.
Yeah, see, I think the weather is so vastly overblown. These teams, they make it act like these teams are outside practicing every day. They might go out for a half of a practice, and everything else is in. So I think that's something for fans to get caught up in, oh, the weather. Man, these guys are indoor. Everybody's got a bubble. Everybody's got a room where they can work out.
We've seen the stats like the last few years, like the Dolphins and Tua when they have to play in cold.
That's
like
the only environment they know, though.
Right, but that's the thing that where if this was the Rams having to go to Philadelphia and play them, then you'd sit here and you'd say, hey, the weather's going to come into a factor because not only are they practicing in LA, playing in a dome year round, now they have to go outdoors in Philadelphia in the middle of January. So that's going to come into play. Where Green Bay, them going to Philadelphia, I mean, it might be warmer for them there, and it might be actually more comfortable temperatures for them to play in there in that environment.
I think the bigger issue is here, and you mentioned Miami. I think if you're an outdoor team, you're better suited for not just the elements, but the turf and the field. This new turf they put down, some people like it, most people hate it. You show me a guy that doesn't want to play on grass, I'll show you a guy that doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But going back to your original point, I think the question is, Green Bay's defensive line is going to have their hands full against Philadelphia, because Philadelphia has a couple of Pro Bowlers. They got a guy his career has turned completely around in Mekhi Becton. And if they start latching on to the Packers early and they can't stop the run, this thing could get out of hand quickly because their running game, as we know, is pretty darn good. And they have multiple receivers to go to. So really what I'm saying is, in postseason, you see a lot of teams that try and load up and try and put 8 in the box. Just try where they want to stuff the run. You can't do it with some of these teams now. You can't do it with Detroit. You can't do it with Philadelphia. You can't do it with Baltimore. I mean, you have to play these guys straight up, and for a lot of times, you're gonna have man coverage on the outside, which means that those safeties have to be very active and keep an eye on those corners. It's going to be a very interesting weekend of football, because we're seeing a generation of football now where not only is it we see more RPO, but we're also seeing teams that have now built themselves for this time of the year. And I told you earlier in the year about when Baltimore picked up their running back, Henry. Felt like, they didn't give a damn what Henry did in September and October. They had him for this time of the year. And I think you have some other teams that are starting to look at it that way as well. So this is going to be a very competitive playoff. Somebody's going to get their hand handed to them. Okay. So it's going to happen. But I think everything else is going to be close. And I go back to what I think is one of the most important elements of the game that people don't talk about is special teams.
The looking at the as you were, Derrick Henry, this was, I think, stat-wise, I think his second best season he's ever put up outside of one of the years in Tennessee. But that year he had about 60, 70 more carries than he had this season. So it shows, the power of having a full offense around you, having a mobile quarterback like Lamar Jackson who could also run the ball, and having receivers who he can target as well. It shows that, Derrick Henry is going to be pretty fresh coming into this postseason.
And it's not like he doesn't know the guys he's running up against in Pittsburgh. And I'm sure this is where I think coaching gets interesting. And maybe Mike Martz can allude to the fact of you hope that some coaches have a half a dozen plays they keep in their back pocket just for postseason. And I'm wondering how much, because these two teams know each other so well, how much are they going to change, or are they just going to man up and just say, look, man, we know what they're going to do. We just got to get there for them. So it's going to be, man, the problem is the winner of that game may not have anything left for anybody else.
Yeah, that's true. Because you mentioned, I wanted to get into it because you mentioned the Lions having an easy route in the NFC, being the 1 seed. Looking at the Chiefs right now, and we can get into this more when we know their opponent next week. But you look at the teams in the AFC compared to every other team that's in the NFC. The Chiefs went 15-2 this year. The Chiefs they went 15-1 and then played.
They went 15-1.5 with the.
They went 15-1 and then dressed a whole bunch of guys to play their game yesterday. But a lot of those games were won by one score. when you get into the postseason, the chances of being able to do that week after week after week in the playoffs, the way they did that in the regular season, seems to go down quite a bit. And you look at some of these teams in the playoffs and the games that some of these teams gave them during the regular season. I think that the Chiefs are going to have a really rough road if they want to three-peat this year.
See, I'm gonna go in the other direction on that. I think the fact that they've been in so many close games, they don't panic. They know what they're capable of doing. And let's just say, if you look at the Texans, the winner of the Texans and Chargers, okay, which one of those teams has late game experience?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you look on the other side, between the Steelers, Ravens, Bills, and Broncos. Only the Bills probably have some late game experience. In most of the case, they're on the wrong end of it, especially when it comes to playing the Chiefs. So I'm going to go in the other direction. I think late game heroics and just patience, but also persistence that you need to have, I think gives the Chiefs an advantage over these other teams because they haven't been there, and they've been there as a unit, from coaching staff on down to the field goal holder. They all have been there, so there's no urgency compared to some of these other teams that, if they're playing catch up or they have a 3-point lead and they look up and here come the Chiefs, and all of a sudden the Chiefs are just marching down the field on them and they don't know how to stop them. They may not punish them physically, but I think their mindset is one, hey, look, we've been here. We know what this takes in order to win.
So it's also known as Black Monday today, Claibs.
Yeah.
We have openings, firings throughout the NFL. I believe the count right now, I think we are at 5 openings at the moment as far as head coaches go.
Let's look. Jets, Patriots. Patriots.
Bears.
Jets, Patriots, Bears.
Jaguars and Saints.
Jaguars and Saints. I think there's somebody else is in that mix that we're not thinking of.
As I'm going through here, Dallas hasn't made a decision yet.
They should.
The Giants have said that Brian Daboll is going to be back next year. Nothing in the NFC West. And then in the AFC, Miami has said their coaches will be back.
What about New Orleans?
Nothing. I said Saints.
You okay? All right. What about Carolina?
That's a first-year job there in Carolina.
Yeah. So was New England.
On top of that, I think you look at the way that Bryce Young played when he came back the second half of that second half of the season, and Bryce Young showed some improvement. They just fired the last guy they fired. Didn't they fire him after 1 year? The guy from
after 1 and some change, Matt Rule.
Yeah. So you can. I mean, if you fire this guy after 1 year, what are you saying to the next guy?
Well, you're saying the ownership is not very good.
Right.
So I think those are the safe teams. I don't see anybody. I think the only one.
Dallas is the only one.
Yeah, and I think there probably needs to be. It's easy to say there should be a change there. But I thought when they went through that stretch, when they had so many injuries, especially on defense, they never had a running game. Zach Martin was just half the player he used to be, and the offensive line really never came together. Then you lose Prescott, and you turn it over to a couple of guys, who are average on their best day. So I don't know if McCarthy is the answer. He might be the fall guy. Now, the question is, what guy or what person would take the Cowboy job knowing they're working for Jerry Jones? And, Jerry's going to have the last say.
I love Jerry Jones's comments yesterday after the game, this via Clarence Hill. Jerry Jones was asked if he would ever give up being the general manager of the Cowboys. His response was, no, just no. I bought the team. I think the first thing that came out of my mouth when somebody asked was, did you buy this for your kids? I said, hell no, I bought it for myself, and I didn't buy an investment. I bought an occupation, and I bought something that I was going to do for the rest of my life, and that's what I'm doing. I'll say this. As bad as it has been recently, good for him for just sticking to it, and he's not going to budge at all, and you know exactly what you're walking into when you are hired by the Dallas Cowboys. You know there's going to be no flip-flopping or change of ownership or anything like that. You know Jerry Jones is there till his heart stops beating.
Yeah, that's true. I think it becomes a respect factor, though. Also, I mean, there are guys who could come in there and coach. If they sit down and say, "All right, this is what we have, this is what we need." I think the last guy who probably had that ability was Bill Parcells. So you're going to have someone with some legitimate credentials to go in there and clean that thing up. Here's the other thing that goes into it. You mentioned Black Friday for head coaches. They're going after coordinators now too.
Mm-hmm.
Coordinators are getting stuck too, and at some point you have to figure out, how do you put your staff together? Is it, if you hire me as a head coach, then I hire the defensive and offensive coordinators. Then does the coordinator have a say-so on who his line coach is? Does the coordinator have a say-so on his linebacker coaches? Coordinator have a say-so on who the receivers coach is? So you see what I'm saying? Where there's a lot of rungs to this ladder that you have to take into account. But at the end of the day, the guy with the title, coordinator, head coach, those are the ones that go down because maybe he didn't have enough help at a position. And I think you have to take a deeper dive on that. Again, that'd be something that I'd be interested to hear Mike Martz talk about, because he was part of that. He's been on both ends of it as an assistant and also as a head coach and putting a staff together. So, and how much input does ownership have as far as staff members who have been around forever? I mean, there's a lot of things that when you hear about these interviews, for these jobs, they're never an hour. I mean, you got to break it all down as far as what you see, what your vision is, who you're thinking about hiring as a coach, what's your system going to be, how do you do this? How do you travel? How do there's so much that goes into it that it's easy to hire a guy, but it's harder to keep a guy because a lot of things have to fall in place. And now you see guys, I look at the guy in Jacksonville. He's hired his third coach. Okay, now that normally doesn't have. You get two of them, and that's probably all you need.
Talking to GM?
Yeah, GM.
Trent Baalke, yeah.
So he's hiring his third coach, and that just normally doesn't happen. And I was a little surprised that the Giants stayed with that combination, considering that they were the ones who decided to walk away from Saquon Barkley. They were the ones who thought that their quarterback was the answer. The only thing they did right, I think, was drafting the receiver. Their defense was okay, but their offense had no imagination after Barkley left, and the offensive line was suspect. And they had quite a few top round picks in their offensive line.
The one situation that I look at as being just, you wonder what's going to come out of it, more details to come out of it. Mike Vrabel this weekend interviewed for the New York Jets job. And as you mentioned, it's a whole process. They take you through everything when they do that. And then an hour after the game yesterday, Patriots fire Gerard Mayo after one season. All indications seem to be that they did that because they want Mike Vrabel as their head coach. So the Jets just let a guy into their building, into their offices, and into their facilities. And now the Patriots are going to go and hire a guy that they play twice a year. That's one of those situations where
Listen, if you got to start worrying about the Jets, they are so far away from reality as far as competition is concerned. They could have given Vrabel the playbooks. Whatever they want. It's the Jets.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't. I think in this case, it probably doesn't make a difference. Now, let's say if the Bears interview Ben Johnson, which it sounds like they will, and he goes in and looks them over. Now he kind of has an idea what they have, how they evaluate their talent, the whole 9 yards. Again, Chicago not necessarily a threat, but I think they're better now than they were last year. So, those situations are going to happen. Not very often, but there's not much that these teams don't know about each other as far as how they do business, because coaches move around, staffs move around, scouts move around. analytics guys move around. So they all kind of have a pretty decent idea of what the mindset is. And really, they have psych evaluations on not just the players, but the coaches and the coordinators and just how the probabilities are going to be. And they do it with general managers too, and what kind of players he looks for when he goes from one city to another.
Yeah, we will talk more NFL next week here on the show after the playoffs are through their first round. Of course, on Thursday, you can listen to Jim Thomas and Mike Martz break down all of the first round matchups on Talking Football. That'll be around 11:30. Yeah.
Will you ask them those questions about putting the staff together and whole interview process?
Oh yeah, no, that's listening. Yeah, I want to listen to Martz talk about what that interview process is like for.
It may have changed somewhat
when
because there's a couple other things that come into play here. The Rooney Rule, they've come to a head where they've got to fix that with regard to its legitimacy. For every young hotshot coach you see, I see a guy that gets fired 2 years later. And I know Mike Martz was big on the fact that, these young coaches who come in, there's a lot of things they just don't know how to do because they haven't had enough experience. So I'm probably looking at a guy who's probably had some NFL experience. Not sure if he has to be a coordinator or not, but obviously be a right hand to someone who was good at it. And then kind of go from there as far as the other layers that you need to sift through in order to make sure you have the right guy who can coach up people. Because remember, he's going to inherit a bad team. And you know what? I'll tell you another team we didn't talk about, Cleveland. What are you going to do there?
And they need to figure out who their quarterback is first.
Well, the first thing they got to do is make sure that Myles Garrett stays.
Right.
But you're right on the quarterback tip. And from what I see, Deshaun Watson included, they don't have one.
Well, reports of Deshaun Watson having a bit of a setback with his Achilles injury, so hopefully that's something that they can look at and get out of. Hey, while we were there talking a bunch of NFL football, email came across my my inbox. Claibs telling me that Friday, January 17th and Saturday, January 18th, you'll be part of the Cardinal Caravan. You'll be on Caravan 4, Claibs. That'll be taking you to Champaign, Illinois, Peoria, Illinois, and then in Bloomington, you and Ricky Horton will be emceeing Caravan 4 along with Cardinal alumni Xavier Scruggs and current players Pedro Pajes, Michael Ciani, Jose Fermin, and Ryan Lotus.
All of those guys, I'm first of all, I'm excited to go to those cities. My good buddy Lonte's up in Champaign. Hopefully that's a place we stay overnight for obvious reasons. But also,
well, it looks like you're at Champaign at noon on the 17th, Claibs, and then you're in Peoria at 6 p.m. So I don't know if it would make a whole lot of sense to go back to Champaign and spend the night there.
Well, I know people in Peoria too, so
yeah,
that'd be. Which, by the way, I've already kind of secured their availability. But point being, the guys that we have on this crew, that's another story for another day. The guys we have this year are going to be fun with regard to Pedro Pajes. You've been around Fermin, who has the greatest personality of anybody yet. This guy's always smiling. He's a delight. And watching Michael Ciani develop and grow, and Ryan Lotus, a guy who went to WashU, and him getting an opportunity. And I think he's going to be looked at a little longer this year coming out of the bullpen. So we're going to have some fun, and we always do. And we hope the weather's good where everybody can come out and say, hey.
That'll be all of that information available online now. You can see if you are listening to us somewhere outside of the St. Louis area, but still within the Cardinal fan base around the Midwest, you can check it out and see where those players, where those caravans will be stopping by, and what players and broadcasters you can meet during the Cardinal Caravan. Looks like all the dates January 17th through January 20th for the Caravan. All of that information available now online. We will take a break. When we come back, we have college football Final Four to talk about this weekend, and we'll do so right here on Lunch with Claibs and Joe.
Let me get this straight. Graybar is a distributor?
Yep. For more than 150 years, we supported electrical and datacom projects all over the country.
So you can get me products wherever and whenever I need them?
Yep. thanks to our expansive national logistics network.
For any industry?
Yep, from construction sites and industrial plants to schools, hospitals, and just about everything in between.
So you could say Gray Bar is much more than a distributor.
Yep, you could say that.
They really do it all.
Yep.
When you need a hand powering, connecting, or maintaining your operations, join the thousands of professionals who rely on Gray Bar to help keep them up and running. Yep, Gray Bar does that.
Back here, lunch with Claibs and Joe here on claibsonline.com. Our first show in the month of January as football playoffs, both NFL and college, are rolling right along. And Claibs, for the first time ever in the 12-team college football playoff, we have reached the Final Four after games from this past week on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and also January 2nd this year. But we are down to just 4 teams. Those games are going to be played this Friday or this Thursday and Friday. First off, down in Miami on Thursday, it's Notre Dame against Penn State. And then down at the Cotton Bowl, down in Jerry World, down in Arlington, on Friday, it is Ohio State and Texas. Notre Dame is I think what Notre Dame is doing, what Marcus Freeman's doing with that Notre Dame group, they're proving how much of a fluke it might have been for that loss for Northern Illinois. And they're going through and they're beating these teams pretty good so far in the playoffs, showing that maybe for once they are actually for real.
Well, here's something else you failed to mention is that they prove what to go after in the portal. They went after experienced players in the portal, and I think that that's really been a huge factor for them. You're right about losing to Northern Illinois. That was the ultimate wake-up call. But, man, I'll tell you something, Joe, that when you look at this playoff setup, the number 1 and 2 seeds, they're sitting at home watching. The teams that we didn't think were very good or wouldn't be able to lived up to that expectation. When you think about Boise State, you think about who was the other one that got the break spread off of them? Oregon, which was a surprise because the Oregon was at home. They're playing a team they'd already faced earlier in the year, but they were never in that thing. Penn State, I think you said, may have had the easiest path to get to the finals. I think Notre Dame's going to have something to say about that. Texas probably should not have won that game, but in my opinion, Texas should not have been playing Arizona State because I never thought they were as for real as their ranking said they were. So this is a fine Final Four. I have no beef with it. You're going to have a well-attended. I mean, all 4 of those schools travel extremely well, and they don't care what price is for a ticket. Well, you can go to Texas and go to go to Miami. So it's going to be fun, and I'm looking forward to it. I don't know if there's a clear-cut favorite. Even the way Ohio State broke up the furniture against Oregon, you still have it in the back of your mind. It's a Ryan Day coach team, and sometimes he has not been able to live up to it, nor has James Franklin. And wouldn't that be something if Ohio State had to play Penn State for the championship?
Right. The folks in the SEC, I don't know, they'd lose their mind if it was 2 Big Ten teams playing each other. And there, I mean, honestly, the SEC doesn't have much of a leg to stand on anymore because I don't know if they fully accepted Texas. I think they kind of were forced to accept Texas. Now the whole year it's not Texas. They're just, we added them. Yeah, we added them. They're not a real SEC team. Now that they're the only one left, they're full blown SEC now.
Oh, they kissing cousins now. I mean, what's
no, we accepted you the whole time. Yeah, you've been SEC
of course you
since day
were.
one. Yeah,
man, come on, man. You weren't at the picnic. We didn't see you at the picnic this year.
Blue blood, SEC. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's funny to watch how this thing unfolds, where everybody's going to lay claim. But I think the tournament is gone the way it should have. Again, like the Boise State game. Boise State did a whole lot of chirping. They were running back. I should have won the Heisman Trophy. But when you get up against the real legitimate programs in this league, in this college football, it's hard. It's really hard. And sometimes you see teams that get muscled off the ball, and that takes place. And at that point, man, everybody talks about these 5-star receivers and quarterbacks. Man, again, I say it time after time after time. If you don't have 5-star guys in that line of scrimmage on both sides, you're going to watch this thing on TV, because there were some teams that would get manhandled out there. I mean, they had no chance.
The way the whole tournament has gone, it's the first year. We know there's going to be tweaks, maybe not in year 2, but they're going to make tweaks to the way the teams are seeded and who's accepted and what, I guess, quantifies an automatic bid. We know that's coming, and we know it's probably coming because teams in the SEC are going to complain about their representation in here. Teams like Ole Miss or Alabama that didn't get a seat at the table this year. But when you look at it, I mean, there's going to be a lot of studies being done as far as how things went, because we saw on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, none of the teams that had first round buys advanced to the next round. So is it a case of that break being too much, or is it a fluke for just having it happen for 1 year? There's going to be all these questions that are going to come out of this now as we head into future years of a 12-team playoff.
You know, you make a good point. I think it goes back to scheduling. You know, you schedule some good non-conference teams, then your right to complain if you're not in, I think, goes higher. I just think you have to do a better job of non-conference scheduling. And if you take a loss early and they look at who you played, you know, and I give you a good example. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, and they had to run the table in order to get in this thing, because somebody would have hung that loss on them for the rest of the year, or another loss. So I'm of the belief, man, you have to figure out a better way to be more competitive in your non-conference schedule in order to get that legitimate recognition, because you're going to always complain about, well, you know, our conference is pretty good. You know, we're playing good teams every Saturday. And in most cases that you are. But when you have another school on your schedule from a comparable conference, I think it just says a lot more. And I think that's something that has to weigh on the committee.
Yeah, we've already seen a few teams too changing conferences, jumping to conferences. Northern Illinois, who we've mentioned earlier in this segment, they're joining the Mountain West, because Claibs, nothing says DeKalb, Illinois like the Mountain West.
I could see the Alumni Association out in the Mountain West all getting together, right? You know, that's about as dumb as St. Louis U going to the Atlantic 10.
Yeah, that's
and you
that know what
work. That's not working.
Good for I could see the Mountain West. They're going to claim they have the Chicago market now. That'll be their claim to it. That'll be how they sell it to people, that they added another team and they have that now. But still, it's
You know what it does do though? It gives players who compete out on the West Coast a better look and a better chance to be seen by the rest of the country. And I'll give you a good example. The kid from Boise State, you know, I mean, he put up some really sensational numbers, but when it was all said and done, nobody saw enough of them to really take him serious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you put these guys on TV more locally, where people in the Midwest and maybe the East Coast will see them, you know, I just think that that's going to do them more justice. I think it'll do them more justice, because, you know, you think about how hard it is now to see teams and players from the West Coast that actually their names are mentioned for the Heisman Trophy. Not that I care about the Heisman Trophy. I think that's one of the biggest jokes that we have going right now. But my point being, you know, the fact is, for that national recognition, I think that you really have to look at that and just say to yourself, okay, this is something we think is going to be good for us.
I will say this before we wrap up college football talk. Last week, I went over to Edwardsville. SIUE was hosting Western Illinois, so I went there to go check out that game. And I do want to give props to SIUE. That was a fun environment for a mid-level, low-level conference Division I basketball game. I know they haven't been Division I for long. I want to say about 10 years now or so. They did a good job of putting on a good show there, and it was a fun environment. And geographically, Claibs, we're sitting here talking about all these ridiculous conferences and how spread out they are. Looking at the banners on the wall there and seeing what the Ohio Valley has, that's about as compact as a geographical conference as I think you're going to find in the entire country. when you look at, I think as far north as Western Illinois, as far south as Little Rock, Arkansas, and then out east, it's Morehead State. I mean, that is your triangle that you have there for that conference, and that makes for some easy travel.
That's what it used to be like, and it's unfortunate that we've gotten away from that. And you know what? It's a pretty good brand of basketball. You think about SIU Edwardsville, you think about Lindenwood, you know, two ascending programs that come into Division I, you know, and the only difference between them is maybe a little size and facility. You know, they compete, they're well coached. And, you know, I think it's important when you have the university behind it, the presidents behind it, and understanding that, hey, we're not going to lose a lot of money on this, but we're going to do this. Let's be competitive. And that's what they've elected to be. And good for them. And I like your geographical setup. It's too bad we just don't see more of that.
Absolutely.
But, like I said, the biggest culprit, and I love them, but the worst thing St. Louis University ever did was go to Atlantic 10.
Yeah.
And I know some think, well, that'll get them in the Big East. Well, how many years have they been in Atlantic 10? And the Big East has had an opening for a few years now, and St. Louis U has not been extended an invitation.
Yeah. Let's take our final break. When we come back.
Let me do one other thing. And I want to go back to football for a minute. I think when we start to talk about football, and maybe even basketball, we start talking about, well, he's a 1,000-yard receiver, he's a 1,000-yard rusher. You know, that averages out to less than 60 yards a game. Okay? 60 yards a game is not impactful. So I want to make sure people understand, back in the day when a guy had 1,100 yards in receiving or 1,000 yards, that was meaningful. But now it's just whatever. And spare me on the 1,000-point club in college basketball. You know, that's less than 15 points a game. So we're going to have to recalibrate how we assess the performance of athletes with regard to putting their numbers up. And it stood out for me watching the Saquon Barkley talk about him going after Eric Dickerson's record, or when the kid out at Boise State was going after Barry Sanders' record. And I'm saying to myself, A, let's look at the competition. B, let's look at the length of the number of games you had to play. You know, and because everybody's schedule is extended. So we need to have a zone where for this period of time, he was the best rusher for this many games, compared to saying he was the greatest of all time, the all-time leading rushing record in a season. That's not fair. It's just like the one record that'll never be broken. You know what that is? 14 interceptions in a 12-game season.
Right. Well, I think the leader this year was some guy from the Lions. He had 9 interceptions.
Yeah, in a 17-game season.
Yeah. I mean, still, to his credit, I saw the stat earlier today. This was the 4th year now that we've had the 17-game schedule in the NFL, and you would think with the way passing has been over the past 20 years now that those kind of records would go down. The numbers that Peyton Manning put up in 2013 still didn't come close to being touched. 5,400 yards that he threw for, 55 touchdowns. Even with the extra game, you're not seeing these quarterbacks coming anywhere close to putting up the numbers like what Peyton did with the Broncos in 2013.
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think teams realize you can't live by the pass. You still have to establish some sort of running game. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to hand it out to a guy who's going to rush for 1,500 yards, but you have multiple guys, you put the ball in their hands and they can do a few things. And I think that's one of the reasons why Peyton's record is safe for a while, because these offenses, they have more than one weapon. And you look at Detroit, you know, pick your poison with them. You look at the good offenses in the National Football League, you have to pick your poison because they can beat you a lot of different ways. And I think that's what we're seeing. That's why in Peyton's year, can anybody tell me who the guy he was handing the ball off to was?
2013, would that have been Noshawn Moreno back in there, or would it have been the kid from the St. Louis kid that went to Wisconsin? Monte Ball.
Monte Ball, who was he was a short yardage guy.
Yeah. I'm looking up that roster right now. It was Noshawn Moreno. I had it right the first time.
How many yards did he have rushing that year?
Oh, that's a rushing for that season. Noshawn Moreno had 241 rushes for 1,038 yards, 10 touchdowns.
So that's my point. He rushed for 58 yards a game.
Yeah.
So that's why Peyton was throwing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he was throwing all the time, because he didn't have a running game.
Yeah. All right, let's take our final break, come back and wrap things up here on Lunch with Claibs and Joe.
Are you ready for a challenging and rewarding career? There are quality jobs in the construction industry.
I got out of college and my career choices were very limited, and this provided me with a plan for the present and the future at the same time.
I actually have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I was making less than I make as a first-year apprentice painter.
I didn't go to college. I have no college debt. I make more money than the majority of people I know that went to college.
Take your first step towards a rewarding career. Visit stlouispdf.org.
Back here, final few minutes of Lunch with Claibs and Joe. And Claibs, no real Cardinal news to talk about. Blues with another good showing at the Winter Classic. I wanted to wrap up the show today, though.
Let me back up though on the Winter Classic. You and I thought it was a really cool event. I got a kick out of it, and because of the history between the two cities. Not that either one of these teams is very good, but did you see the ratings? It's one of the worst ratings they've ever had.
They also did it on New Year's Eve this year, not New Year's Day like they have in the past.
Well, I think they would have gotten killed on New Year's Day because there were just too many other things to go up against.
Yeah.
I got to think, where is this league going now? I mean, because national numbers do not indicate they're doing well. This is your biggest stage, the Winter Classic, and what you had less than 1 million people watch it. Now, you can say there were distractions where people were out and about and getting ready for New Year's Eve and all of that. But what's the difference between that and New Year's Day, where you got a whole bag of football games to watch? And we know hockey is not going to compete with college football or the NFL.
And the fact, too, yeah, you have it's, the way of TV watching. That's one of the things I was going to bring up when we were talking about this, because right now I don't know what station the Winter Classic was on. I don't know what station most of these things are on. When I click on them, I just put on Hulu TV, and if it pops up as something you might be interested in watching, I'll click on it. That's I don't know what channel most of the sports are on unless I know the announcer. I see the graphic in there. But that's one thing that the NFL, I think that they have realized the past few years doing the streaming services when they have the game on Prime and when they had the game on Netflix, because you want to talk ratings, look at the Christmas Day ratings for the NBA this year. Yeah. And look at how much those were down. And when you look at it, you have NFL games on Netflix. Claibs, if you log into Netflix, if you are going into Netflix to watch an NFL game, you're not going and clicking back to go to another service to click off of that. It's not as simple as saying, right, hey, I was on channel 52. I'm going to go to channel 4. And I just have to hit the previous channel button. No, you have to go out of that app and into a new app. Yeah. And okay, we're talking about 10, 15 seconds, but still, it's not something you're going to sit there and do. And I think the NFL has kind of realized that with some of these other games you see this weekend. One of the afternoon game or the evening game on Saturday, that's only on Prime Video. Steelers Ravens, that is on Prime. You have to go on Amazon Prime to watch that on your TV. And Claibs, I was going to bring up tonight, we have seen now recently, we saw the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul fight on Netflix. You saw the NBA games on Netflix. Tonight, WWE Monday Night Raw makes its debut on Netflix as part of a 10-year deal. You are seeing more and more of these TV shows and sports switching over to the streaming platform. And we have seen, I think, in the last, 3-4 months now, a huge shift in how I think we're going to be seeing these TV deals going down over the next decade.
I don't know if they'll go down. I just think they'll be.
I'm talking about how they're going to be negotiated and how they're going to be signing to these other networks or other streaming services.
Oh, I agree with you there.
I'm not saying the money's going to go down. No, not at all. The deal that WWE is starting tonight with Netflix is just, it's astronomical what they're doing over the next 10 years for this deal. I believe there's a 5-year opt-out, but it's one of those things where when they were on USA Network for the last 30 plus years, and the last few years, 2.5 million would be a good 2.5-3 million would be a good viewing on that. It's, I think, watching and seeing what the ratings look like on somewhere like Netflix, it's going to be pretty fascinating for all of the major sports industries to look at and see.
Well, and I think they did it at the right time because they're not competing against anyone tonight. There's no Monday Night Football. It's kind of a dead night when it comes to sports. But I'm going to go back to something you said I think is very intriguing. Once you lock into this streaming service, it's not like you can switch it back to Channel 4 or Channel. You got to get out, go back in. And people who are so used to convenience, they may push back on that. Because I know the streaming service wants you to stay with the game or the event, but we as fans, we get that remote in our hand. We want to click this and click that and go back and forth the whole 9 yards. And I'm trying to figure out how they combat that, because some people get locked on to a station and then may not go back. And I think that's something they're going to have to pay close attention to. This next 3 years or less, and how we watch TV is going to be very interesting in what sticks and what stays.
I went last night. This is a good story for that too, because last night I started watching the Sunday night game on Hulu. On Hulu TV, I was watching Channel 5, the broadcast for that. They kept showing on the top and the bottom the weather updates, what was closed for today, this and that. I got annoyed by that. Claibs Sunday Night Football is also streaming on Peacock. I got out of Hulu. I went to Peacock knowing that none of the weather alerts were going to be popping up on Peacock, just so I didn't have all of that other stuff on my screen, because I knew damn well everything was closed today. I didn't need that running nonstop.
Yeah, and you know what? That's funny you say that.
I went to Peacock and I watched it. It was a nice clean screen, the exact same broadcast, but I didn't have any of the local alerts on there.
I agree. You would think a person with the common sense of a kicking tee would know that things aren't going to be open tomorrow.
Right.
It's not like when I was a kid where, you got the phone call or you listen to KMOX in the morning and those schools out. Man, they close everything up now for virtually nothing. Although this was a very, very good excuse on why to close. The weather is very inclement. But end of the day, it's local TV getting in the way. And I got to tell you, man, me watching local news on the weekends is really, really hard for a lot of different reasons. And if they don't fix how they do local news on the weekends, there'll be no reason to watch it.
Right. Well,
now I've said my piece. I'm sure somebody, what do you mean? You watch it and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Well, Claibs, tonight for your viewing, as you said, no other games on tonight, so you can lock into Netflix and watch the debut of Monday Night Raw. It's going to be from the Intuit Center out in Los Angeles. That's where it's emanating from tonight. So first chance for a lot of people to see what that arena looks like for any kind of events out there. You haven't made it out there yet, right?
I've been by it, but I have not been in it.
Okay.
So, it's interesting. You say this be our first look at it. What we're going to do, we're going to watch the ring and the lights, unless they're going to have a camera, just walk around and show you. I saw a piece on 60 Minutes about it about a month ago. It looks like a fascinating place, but it's an arena. There's a lot of interesting new arenas. I think the Chase Center out in San Francisco is a very nice setup. I'm told this one is a nice setup. The Barclays Arena, I don't know one person who's been there who thinks that's a good setup. Because there's only so many things you can do. So technology is going to have to play a bigger role in the entertainment factor. And when you go to one of these events, and when you go, you better bring your credit card because they don't take cash.
Yeah. No, that's the case for pretty much everywhere these days. So if you're still, if that's the way you're going about it, time to get with it. It's 2025. Claibs, that's going to wrap it up for our show today. Talking football coming your way on Thursday here on Claibs Online, and stay tuned in the next few weeks. A big announcement coming your way from us as well that we're getting real excited for it to bring you the news of what we have coming for you here in 2025. Claibs.
Looking forward to it. It's going to be an interesting 2025, to say the least.
He's Mike Claiborne. I'm Joe Roderick. This has been Lunch with Claibs and Joe here on Claibs Online.
Nobody wants a surprise in their jelly donut. That's because the middle is the most important part. At Graybar, we're at the middle of electrical and datacom jobs across the country. connecting installers, facility managers, and business owners with smart solutions for their most challenging projects, which means stocking and delivering crucial products on time and on budget, with no surprises, thanks to our nationwide logistics network. Yep, Graybar does that.